Hello, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to be here once again to the beginning of another month to bring to you a series about Dr. Marlene Nobre. And today we have here in the studio with us, let me welcome our dear friend Júlio. Hello, Júlio. Good to see you. First and foremost, thank you very much for being here with us and for giving some of your time to bring to us your impressions about this book by Dr. Marlene Nobre. Let me just add here. So today is the soul of matter, and our dear friend Júlio Carvalho will bring his appreciation about the content of this book. So thank you very much, Júlio, and welcome.
The pleasure is mine, Munir. Thank you so much for having us.
Good. To those who don't know Júlio, this is the first time he's actually giving his contribution to our series. We've been having series about important authors in Spiritism for the past few years. So Júlio Carvalho, he is a Spiritist since he was 14 years old, and he since then he's been very active, participating in the Spiritist movement, and currently he serves on the Three States Spiritist Federation. He is one of the founders of the Reincarnation and Evolution Philosophical Center in New Jersey, in the United States, where he serves as the coordinator of Spiritist studies. Júlio is a lecturer in numerous states across North America and Canada, engaging in doctrinal outreach programs and conducting training seminars for Spiritist workers. So a very active person. He was one of the invited speakers at the pre-Congress program of the 7th World Spiritist Congress in Cuba some years back. He's professionally speaking, he worked actually as a Union County Jail in New Jersey for 12 years, serving as a psychotherapist for inmates. He also spent 3 years working in hospice care, providing psychotherapy to patients at the end of life and their families. Currently, he owns a psychotherapy agency with a team of over 20 clinicians offering psychological interventions to children, youth, and families. So Júlio, he moved to the United States when he was 13, and he's married for over 20 years now. He's been married for over 20 years, and he's got 2 children. Just to give you, a brief idea of who Júlio is, and I won't take much of your time now. Júlio, I'll hand it over to you. If you need me, just give me a shout. So see you shortly.
First of all, I want to thank the team for inviting me. This is a great honor to be part of this, and hopefully we can attend to your expectations, which is a brief understanding of what Dr. Marlene Nobre did with this book. So this book is the result of lectures she gave in 6 different countries. The title of the book is The Soul of the Matter. Now, for those of you who don't know who Dr. Marlene Nobre is, let's just give a brief overview. This is her right there, Dr. Marlene Nobre, in one of her lectures. And she was a medical doctor specializing in gynecology and obstetrics, prominent Spiritist scholar and lecturer, founder and president of the Medical Spiritist Association of Brazil, founder of the Medical Spiritist International Association, close collaborator of the Spiritist leader Francisco Cândido Xavier, author of several books. And she's most famous for contributing to the integration of spirituality and medical science. So this is what her life passion was, to integrate, because she was a doctor, spirituality with medicine. So she dedicated most of her lifetime to disseminate the idea that we should bridge spirituality with medicine. And back in the early 2000s, she did a trip to Europe and she visited 6 countries. And the book that we're discussing today, entitled The Soul of the Matter, is a result of those lectures. So in chapter number 1, which is entitled Medical Spiritist Paradigm, she discusses the point of intersection between medicine and spiritism. So for the Spiritist philosophy, for those who are not aware, Spiritism has as one of its postulates that we are immortal. Nothing dies. Our body is nothing but a biological machine. And when we die, what dies is the machine that returns to where it came from, to nature, and is recycled. The molecules, the protons, electrons, and neutrons, what makes us up in regards to matter, gets to be recycled by nature to compose different organic bodies. But we, the thinking entity of that machine, is no longer in that machine. So Dr. Marlene Nobre, she dedicated her life in order to bring about this knowledge to the medical community, that we should not see individuals simply as a collective sum of organs, but rather an individual who is temporarily inhabiting that body. So that would be the integral vision of the spirit. Mental metal creation. In this part of chapter 1, she discusses that we should not see that our brain produces our mind, that the brain is nothing but an instrument of the mind. Once again, the brain is an instrument. It's not what produces our thinking and thought. According to Dr. Marlene Nobre, who dedicated to study the integration of the spirit with the matter, she establishes, based on the Spiritist teachings, philosophy, and foundation, that we are made up of 3 distinct things. We, the thinking being, then our body, our organic machine, and something that is between our mind and the body, also named perispirit. And so this is what we are made of. And she argues that we should study diseases from that point of view, not only what happens with the body, but especially how the individual inside the body is behaving. So in the Spiritist philosophy, we learn about the law of action and reaction. Everything that we do has consequences. If we do something good, there are positive consequences. If we do something that is not too smart for us, then there are negative consequences. And one of the consequences when we do things that we shouldn't are diseases. So we should look at the individual from that perspective. And this is where she establishes that the medical spiritist paradigm, to make a diagnosis while doing the amnesis, which is the process of interviewing the patient, the medical professional should consider all these different aspects while interviewing the patient. And once that paradigm is shifted, that I should consider the individual as a whole, what's going to happen is that the therapy would be very different. I'm not only treating the machine, but most importantly, the individual inside the machine. And Dr. Marlene Nobre argues that once we get to that point, we will no longer be working so much in trying to heal people, but we are preventing the diseases to begin with. And healing spirituality would take place when we finally understand that the causes of many diseases that we have lies on the way we behave. When we allow our instinct and emotions to run rampant, and we have no self-control, and we allow, everything that causes our pain, selfishness, greed, jealousy, pride, arrogance, envy. These are powerful emotions that unfortunately they cause much pain in our lives. But because we are right now in an age of economic growth, I should point out that we should not confuse greed with ambition. Ambition is something very, very useful. It's what actually makes us evolve from a material perspective. If it wasn't for ambitions, we'll still be living, in caves and on trees. Greed, on the other hand, it's when we don't care what we do, as long as we get what we want. And in that regard, we might kill, we might steal, we might betray, and that's where it becomes unhealthy. Just want to make it clear not to confuse greed with ambition. And one of the most important aspects of this whole shift in the paradigm of how we treat patients and we see ourselves is that we are individuals who have many physical existences, also known as reincarnation. And the word reincarnation, just like many words, has suffix and a prefix that actually helps us understand what the word means. The suffix "yan" in reincarnation means an action is taking place, just like in conversation, manipulation, aggravation, an action is taking place. And then we have the prefix "re," which stands to repeat, redo, replace. We're doing something over again. And then we have another prefix, which means, which is "in," that means enter. And then we have the root of the word, that carne, which means flesh. What does reincarnation stands for? The action of re-entering the flesh. Life is one, but our physical existences are many. So, and continue with chapter number 1. She discusses the advancements in understanding the human brain. The reptilian brain, which is the stem brain, and then we have the limbic brain, which is the emotional brain, and then we have the frontal lobe that becomes the thinking brain. And that changes our perspective on health on 21st century. Once again, the need to see the individual as a whole, taking into account these different perspectives of how we should interpret ourselves. She also talked about vaccines and how we have changed the way we create them in order to bring about health. And she also talks in chapter 1, the morbid predispositions versus conduct. Certain individuals have crystallized way of thinking, and that causes many of the diseases they face. And on this chapter, she also talks about the Genome Project, which was headed by Francis Collins. And we have the entire map genome. And it was thought back before the mapping of the DNA that we would have many, many more genes than we actually have. And we have about 30,000 genes. And the interesting thing is that this mapping of the genome, as discussed by Dr. Marlene Nobre, changed much of the way we see ourselves. Because with the mapping of the genome, we found out that what distinguishes us from the biological point of view is very small in comparison to other organisms like a rat, a monkey or a dog. It's a very, very small difference, which means to us that there's more into what composes us, what makes us up than just the genetic material. She talks about cancer on this topic on chapter 1. Cancer, once again, is a big name in order to fit many different kinds of problems with the body, including the fast multiplication of cells, in an uncontrolled manner. And once again, whenever she's bringing these different topics on every chapter, on every paragraph, Dr. Marlene, she is careful to explain the moral aspect of all these situations. And what is cancer from a spiritual perspective? You see, in the Spiritist philosophy, we learn that whenever we harm someone, we ended up harming ourselves. But the thing is, for those who have a superficial understanding of what that concept stands for, they believe that if I kill someone in this current reincarnation, then on the following reincarnation, I have to be killed by someone else to atone for my mistake. Now, that would implicate for someone to actually reincarnate with the mission to kill someone else. Now, that does not exist. No one is born with the mission to kill someone else. We are all born in order to evolve, to progress, to be a better version of ourselves. Now, many people, they say, I think I have a mission, but I don't know what my mission is. Where your mission is for you to be a better version of yourself, to be more equipped intellectually, and to be more virtuous by acquiring more moral values. That is our mission. So no one is born with the mission to kill someone. So what happens? How can I atone a mistake I have done without implicating other people? Well, that's what diseases are there for. Disease is a way in which we can atone for a past mistake without involving a third person in order for me to make up for the mistake I have done. And there are many types of cancer that serves that purpose. Now, I always put myself in the place of whoever's hearing this information. And sometimes the person who's hearing this information can be someone who was recently diagnosed with cancer. Now, let me be very clear that the natural laws that guide these processes, it's not about punishment. This is not about you being punished for something that you have done, but rather an educational process in which the individual learned from pain what the same individual refused to learn from love. I'll give you a very small example that anyone can understand. Let's say someone who's 18 years old begins to smoke, and his mom comes to him and says, why are you doing this to yourself? You're killing your body. And that guy says, please, it's my life, it's my body, I do anything I want with it. And so here comes a girlfriend and tells him, you know what, whenever I kiss you, I can taste that cigarette in your mouth. This is horrible. Please stop smoking. And this individual, very stubborn, he refuses. And he even goes to a movie and he sees a scene in which the implicit message is stop smoking. This is unhealthy for you. And that person keeps refusing. And all these messages are, quote unquote, messages of love, because this is life trying to help this individual understand that our body was not made to be destroyed that way. It's a slow process of killing ourselves. So now this guy, he's 50 years old, and he begins to cough and he begins to have back pains. And then he finally goes to a doctor, and the doctor says to him, you have lung cancer. There's nothing I can do. It's too advanced. Now, is this individual being punished? This is not necessarily punishment. This is a natural consequence of disobeying a natural law. And the law tells us for us to take care of this machine. And when that individual refuses to listen to the law, here comes pain to teach him exactly what love was trying to say. And Dr. Marlene Nobre, throughout this book, this is what she constantly tells us at the end of each paragraph, at the end of her rational conclusion about a specific topic, that we should go back and try to analyze our acts and analyze ourselves and see what laws are we following, because we are all under the natural law of cause and effect. And even if we don't like it, if we don't believe it, there is nothing we can do to run from it, which should be a warning that we should learn and try to live by it. So she tells us about the rebuilding of the body after many progress in the Genome Project, because remember, the Spiritist philosophy tells us that we are moving forward. Our planet is also developing. Most of you are aware of the law of evolution discovered by Charles Darwin, and we think that that only applies to organisms, but from the Spiritist perspective, everything is evolving, including our planet, including our civilization. Obviously, the evolution takes place in very small increments. There is no quantum leaps here, but we are evolving. And we evolve in all different aspects. When individuals who are engaged in any kind of religious activity, they only see evolution from a spiritual perspective. And yes, and that is true. We also evolve spiritually. Our understanding of the supreme intelligence evolves as we have more ability to understand the natural physical laws that govern our universe. Now, just think for a moment how many changes there were in our understanding of the cosmos by the evolution of the telescope. But that evolution is not only limited to spiritual evolution, but rather also economical evolution, uh, an economic system in which will produce prosperity to all of us. Then we have evolution of medicine as well, technology, and all these different types of evolution is for our planet to become a better school for all of us. And as we evolve, not only we better ourselves, but we enhance the living capability of the planet we inhabit. And for us, planet Earth. And as technology evolves, so our way we deal with diseases, for eventually one day we have no pain. And reason being is because we have achieved a process of evolution that we're learning only from love, and no longer there is a need to learn from pain. So that's what she talks about when we get to a point in which we'll be able to rebuild our bodies. And then, according to Dr. Marlene Nobre, we are going to delay aging. And the question is, why why do we want to extend our material life? Well, there are many reasons for that. And obviously, from the material perspective, people who believe that you only live once, they want to be here as long as they can, as long as they have quality of life. But from the spiritist perspective, the reason why we want to be here, as long as we can, is because while we are in the flesh, we are putting into practice the lessons that we need in order to evolve. Now, between reincarnations, we are gaining theory of what we should do. But it's only when we reincarnate at this stage of our evolution that we actually gain progress when we are in the flesh, putting into practice the lessons we have learned between reincarnations. So one of our responsibilities is to prolong our physical body as long as we can, to extend our capability of staying in the flesh. And with that, there are many different experiments in order to change the telomeres. This is the part of our cells that unfortunately diminishes with time. And that understanding, if we can actually change the way the telomeres behave, that can help us to prolong our physical existence. Now, nowadays, there are individuals who are more than 120 years old. I know that's exception. That is the exception to the rule. But, this could be commonplace in 50, 100 years from now as we advance in science. I worked 3 years in the hospice setting. Whenever someone was dying, they wanted to die with dignity, meaning I don't want to die at the hospital, away from my pet, away from my house. I want to be, in my bedroom when I die. So this is what hospice is for, to help that individual be comfortable as much as he or she can in their own residence. And whenever we had someone who was 80 years old, we actually thought that that person was young because most of our patients were above 90. I actually had a patient who was 107 years old. I had many patients who were more than 90 years old. And I always asked these individuals two important questions, just for my own sake of knowledge to understand human behavior. I asked them, when you were young, just imagine, this is a question for someone who's 97, someone who's 103 years old. When you were young, did you think that you're going to live for this long? And inevitably, most of them said, absolutely not. I never thought I was going to reach this age. But then some of them divulged an information that I didn't ask, which was also, I never thought that it would go by so fast. Look how interesting this is. They never thought they're going to get to that age, but they never thought it was going to go so fast. Now, that alone, I believe it requires a whole different lecture, because for someone who's 103 years old to tell you that life goes by so fast, they never thought it would go so fast, that alone gives us lots food for thought. So Dr. Marlene, she studied also the evolution of science, and she hoped that one day we're all going to reach 150 years old so we can prolong our existence here. Paths of solidarity. So she completes this chapter 1 of the medical spiritist paradigm by saying that doctors should engage in activities to help other people. Because for those of you who are listening to this for the first time, if an individual is a spiritist and they are a doctor, they don't see themselves as being a doctor only when they are inside a hospital, only when they are in their clinic, but they see themselves as being a doctor, a server of the people, all the time. So they engage in activities in which there is not necessarily money involved. There's no financial interest here in order to help other individuals. And she concludes this by making a statement that spiritist doctors are aware that they're also Christians, and as Christians, we should help one another. So then she begins chapter 2, and she discusses the perispirit. What is the perispirit? Well, it's the spiritual body that is intermediary between our physical body and the spirit. So I, the spirit, I have the command, that the command is hit my hand. The perispirit transmits that information, and the body executes the information. This is a very rudimentary explanation, but that's basically the way it works. And she goes on to explain that the perispirit has also different parts of its own. She describes the perispirit as being this onion with multiple layers. And one of the layers she talks about is the vital body. Now, the word vital comes from the word life. And this is actually the part of the perispirit that gives us the amount of years we have in our body. It's like the gasoline in your car. That will be the vital fluid. And for those of you who never read anything like it, you'll be surprised that when we are reincarnated, we come with a specific amount of vital fluid, which means that once you get to the age in which you're supposed to come back to the spiritual plane, it means that the vital fluid is running empty. That's all that means. So that individual will now have a very peaceful death from the organic perspective, meaning there is no pain. This individual goes to sleep, and one of the vital organs stops functioning, probably the heart. And that individual has a cardiac arrest during night. A very peaceful, very uneventful death. And that is because the vital fluid is empty, is gone. So this is one of the discussions that she has. And then she talks about the constitution of the chakras. The chakras, or centers of forces, are organs in the perispirit. So you have the coronary, you have the splenic, you have the genetic, you have these different centers of forces. And usually when we get sick, it's because these spiritual organs are in conflict. They are disturbed. They are contaminated. And if a spiritist medical doctor is aware of this knowledge, that person will know that whatever physical ailment is showing in the body is the result of the ailment that is in the perispirit. Also, the perispirit has many different functions, and one of them is that the perispirit serve as a mold, serve as a pen, if I may say, for the formulation of the new body. So this is the way it basically works. Let's go back to the example of someone who smokes. An individual who smokes, not only they're damaging their physical lung, but also they are damaging the part of their perispirit that represents the lung. So when that individual dies, once again, it's not the individual dying, but the machine that stopped to work, and now the individual is released from a broken machine. Now, if you are also in the spiritual plane next to this individual who died of lung cancer because of all the years of smoking, you actually see the part of the lung in the perispirit also damaged. In the spiritual body, you see the part that represents the lung damaged by the smoke, by the many years of smoke as well. So what's going to happen in the next reincarnation? When that individual reincarnates, that person will be born with some disease of the lung, because the perispirit serve as a mold. The perispirit serve as a pan. For example, if you are cooking cake, and if you want a round cake, what do you use? A round pan. If you want a square cake, what do you use? A square pan. So the cake would take the form of the mold, of the pan. And that what is the spiritist, that is what the perispirit does. It gives the form to the body. That explains many of the ailments that people are born with. The perispirit is what gives our body its shape. And she goes in depth in many different parts of the book about the influence of the perispirit in the formation of the body. You see, for those who dedicate themselves to the study of embryogeny, this is a branch of science that studies the development of the fetus, the beginning of the fetus, and how the entire process takes place. When they are honest and humble scientists, they usually use the word miracle to describe what happens. Because, think for a moment, it's just one cell, the zygote, that is responsible for the creation of trillions of cells. That's what we are. Our organic reality, it's trillions and trillions of cells that came from one single cell. In a couple of months, think for a moment that one single cell will multiply its own weight by more than 10,000 times in a matter of months. That's just incredible. And the rate of multiplication of the cells, that's mind-boggling. And there's a moment in which that rate of multiplication of cells actually diminishes. Because if the same rate of multiplication continue throughout the development of the fetus, by the time the fetus is born, and it will be as big as a dinosaur, but obviously a baby is not when it's born, big as a dinosaur, but small enough to pass through the birth canal. And that in itself is just amazing. Think of your hand, the cells that compose your hand. These cells are multiplying in order to compose your entire hand. But it gets to a point in which the cells between the fingers, they stop multiplying. But the other cells next to that, cells who stop multiplying, they continue to multiply to form the fingers. There's so many things that is just mind-boggling when it comes to the development of the fetus, that the scientists who dedicate themselves to embryology, when they're honest, they will usually say, we have no clue what happens. It's just amazing. And from the spiritist perspective, we understand that in the process of the development of the fetus, there is a guiding form, a guiding mode that is actually dictating what multiplies, what rate at the cells multiplies. That zygote is developing, not aimlessly, but it's being coordinated by the form of the perispirit, which is the spiritual body. Now, for those of you who dedicate yourselves to science, to the study of embryology, all of these things I'm saying, obviously, it's not a scientific fact. This is a revelation of the spiritist philosophy. However, what we also understand that's going to happen in the future, it's not going to be that we are able to believe in all these things because a certain branch of spirituality has multiplied to an extent in which now everybody believes in a certain way. Not at all. What we are describing here are the result of natural laws. And whatever it's natural, it will be discovered eventually by science, because the goal of science is to understand how natural law works. And the spiritual plane will be discovered by, scientific instruments. We will be able to contact those who have left the flesh just the same way we're able to contact someone who is overseas by a telephone call or by seeing them through a WhatsApp video call. We will be able to do these things because our scientific instruments will be sensitive enough to detect the spiritual reality. And when that day comes, it will no longer be a matter of belief in the afterlife or in belief that individuals go on, but it will be a scientific fact. Not because we were actually looking for it, but because we stumble upon it by always trying to improve the sensitivity of our instruments. So we should keep an open mind about these different things. The reason I say this is because whatever science considers a scientific fact, it's not the result of one or two or three scientists who agreed upon some research that they have done. But science is the collection of the agreement. A scientific fact is actually the agreement of many scientists running the same scientific experiments and getting the same scientific results. And that becomes an accepted fact throughout the scientific community. And the discussions we're having today here, I'm bringing this about because Marlene Nobre, she was humble enough to repeat this throughout her book, that these are our isolated opinions about the reality of the world. And we have no presumptions of forcing people to believe in this stuff because we are aware through the spiritist revelation that this is what we're going to stumble upon as we move technologically, as we evolve our instruments to detect the reality of the spiritual life. So going back here to chapter 2, we learn that not only our body evolved, but also the perispirit. Dr. Marlene Nobre, she brings about the knowledge of Charles Darwin, which is limited to explain many things, but he gave us a big picture that we evolve from simpler organisms to more complex organisms. That is true. But the evolution does not happen only in the physical plane. There is also an evolution in the spiritual plane. So it's not only the body that it's evolving, but also the spirit and the spiritual body that the spirit uses, also named perispirit. So one of the doubts of Charles Darwin, it's that, he thought if we study history, we would see, the transitions between the species, from one species to another. And we haven't found none of that, very, very little that does not support the entire picture. Because throughout the history of the evolution of planet Earth, there were explosions of life. One of the most known, that happened about 540 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion, in which many complex organisms appeared without a previous, more simpler organism that evolved to be the complex organism. And this baffles those who follow the classical Darwinian model. And we spiritists, we understand that the evolution happens in two planes, in the physical plane and also in the spiritual plane. And the perispirit, it's the form that gives the shape to the new life that is going to exist. In just the same way, we have individuals who dedicate themselves to engineering the human body. One of the purposes of the DNA Genome Project was for us to learn the DNA and avoid diseases right there from the get-go by manipulating the genes. That is a genetic engineer, someone who manipulates DNA matter in order to shape the future organism that is in development. And so if we have these individuals in the physical plane, we also have them in the spiritual plane. They are spiritual engineers who are in charge of the guidance of our physical evolution. And these individuals, they do not manipulate DNA. They manipulate the spiritual body, the perispirit. They change that body. So now from this argument, as you can see, if the body is taking the form of the perispirit, and if I change the perispirit and the spiritual body, then whatever body, whatever cells I receive, it's going to take the form of the perispirit. So Charles Darwin talks about natural selection and natural evolution, in contrast with artificial selection. Artificial selection will be when someone purposely chooses, a good horse to mate with another good horse in order to produce an offspring that has the combination of those two horses. That will be an artificial selection because there is a human being who's intervening in the selection in order to produce a better organism by using two very good horses. And in the spiritual plane, the same process happens. As a matter of fact, there's rarely a natural evolution. There's always an artificial selection because there are those who are helping us guide our evolution. So the spiritual plane, once again, to be very clear, there are engineers of evolution who manipulate the perispirit in order for the organism to evolve. So that explains, all of these missing links in the biology, in the history of the biological organisms in the planet, because the organisms were changed in the spiritual plane. And when that spiritual body was actually modified to be a more complex organism, whatever cells came into that pan, into that spiritual pan, or into that spiritual mode, it took the shape of that mode. We have explained the role of the perispirit in diseases. So all diseases that we have, they stem from a sort of a disharmony in the perispirit. And we have the pathologies of the perispirit, diseases that stem from previous reincarnation, not necessarily organic diseases from previous reincarnation that shows up in our perispirit, but also mental diseases. One of the most destructive emotion to the perispirit is guilt. And she discusses a little bit of guilt in her book. What is guilt? Guilt is the emotion that I experience when I arrive at the conclusion that I have done something that I shouldn't. And it doesn't matter who comes to us and try to help us. If we know that we have done harm to another that we shouldn't, our own consciousness beats us up on a daily basis. It doesn't matter if a religious authority comes and gives us some sign of the cross and they try to liberate us from our sins. It doesn't matter if a good psychiatrist gives us powerful medication for us to get out of depression because of your guilt. All these different things will not make the guilt disappear. What makes the guilt disappear, it's when we do the equivalent of what we have done bad, we do good. Let me repeat that. Guilt disappears when I do the equivalent of good of what I have done bad. Now, let me explain in money terms because it's easy to understand. If I steal $100 from someone and that makes me feel guilty, I will only liberate myself of guilt when I return the $100. It doesn't have to be necessarily to that person because the person could have died. It could be to someone else. And it doesn't have to be $100. It could be, in increments of $5 until I get to 100. And that makes me feel good. This is why in many religious traditions, and the most important one, the Christianity, it emphasizes how important it is for us to help other people, the importance of charity, the importance of us giving ourselves to others, trying to diminish the pain of our neighbor. And reason being, it's because when I love other people through the acts of charity, I am liberating my own self from the mistakes I have done. By helping others, I alleviate my own pain. And I'm emphasizing this point because Dr. Nobre, she finished each of these chapters by bringing a moral argument into the picture. Because it's very important for us to know that, yes, let's seek knowledge, let's enhance our intellect as much as we can. But that knowledge has to be accompanied by moral virtues, because a well-enlightened brain without love, without balanced emotions, would do much harm with that intellect. We should put our intellect under the control of love, because that way we're always using our intelligence to move ahead and not to remain stationary. Let's continue here with the chapter 3, the concept of a person in spiritism. Chapter 3, she talks about the foundation of bioethics. And bioethics, it's the part of science that studies what we should do, what's right, what's wrong in accordance to our medical intervention. And that's bioethics. And she discusses different models of bioethics. And she talks about the model that sees the individual as a collection of organs. That's reductionism. We're nothing but matter. And for those individuals, what would be the best course of action? And this is under the topic of bioethics. What we should do as a doctor. If I see my patients as nothing but a collection of protons, neutrons, and electrons, well, if that individual is in pain, why prolong the pain of that individual? So let's offer euthanasia. Or if a baby is it's defective, why should we give that individual the chance of continue to live with that birth defect? Why not kill the baby? Because that would be considered the right thing to do if I see myself as someone who does not believe that we are nothing but matter. So this is the branch of science that talks about the importance of knowledge, trying to interpret life the way it is. And if we have a reductionist interpretation of life, there are many consequences on what we do, on what we counsel, on what we suggest to others to do with their own life. Not only this, but also our own legislation. Because if this is what we believe, then we change the laws in order for the laws to suit to our view of life. And if I believe that individuals are nothing but matter, I want to diminish pain as much as I can, and I want to emphasize pleasure as much as I can. And every decision I make, I should look at those 2 point of views in order to guide what is the best course of action. Obviously, with the Spiritist philosophy view, we see that we're not a collection of matter, but rather a thinking being who is currently and temporarily in a machine, and that we should do our best to preserve life no matter what. And reason being is because our lives, our physical existence, is an opportunity for our growth. And if I make a decision to shorten my life because I have a disease, in reality, what I'm doing, I'm just prolonging my pain. We Spiritists understand that euthanasia is a type of suicide. Now, obviously, whoever's committing euthanasia, the goal here is to alleviate themselves from the pain. No one in their right mind commits euthanasia for the sake of euthanasia. They're trying to run away from pain. But the Spiritist literature gives us plenty of of examples that those who sort out to euthanize themselves, to commit suicide, not only the pain they were trying to run away from, or it's still there, but now it's multiplied due to the fact that they understood that life goes on, and that pain should have been overcome and not run away from. We're running away from time here. Let me just cover chapter 3 here, the reincarnation process. For those of you who want to read more in depth how reincarnation actually happens, there is a book entitled The Missionaries of Light, and it talks about the details of the reincarnation of an individual. It talks about the importance of the harmony between the woman and the man in order for that to take place. This is very interesting because the individual who will reincarnate is actually someone who in the previous existence killed his father to be. So the father actually resisted him to be his son. So there were many individuals involved to convince the father to forgive his murderer from his previous existence and to allow him to become his son in order for them to atone for their mistakes from the past, to sublimate that relationship between those 3 individuals, the mom, the son, and the dad. Very, very interesting stuff if you want to delve into this subject. She also talks about the manipulation of genetics, and she tells us to be very careful how we proceed with our experiments to clone organisms in order to multiply them in a better version of that organism. And she talks about this stuff because this lecture, which resulted in this book that we're discussing today, happened in the year 2002. And back in 1997, there was the cloning of the sheep Dolly. And so the cloning conversation, the cloning discussion when it was at its height back in 2002. And today, there are more than 60 species of animals that have been cloned. There are people who pay thousands and thousands of dollars to clone their dog. You know, you develop this passion and this love for your pet. You know, you have your pet for 18 years, and the pet dies. So for some people, if they have the money, they will go ahead and take a cell of that animal and then they duplicate the animal. So they have this illusion that they are having the same exact animal. When in reality, you know, even if we clone individuals, you know, our spirit, who we are, it's a very unique individual. If someone was able to clone me, and then I see a little of me being born and growing up to be a child and then a teenager, that is not a duplicate of who I am. I, the spirit, that is nothing but a duplication of my car, of my biological machine, my car. It's the same as if I'm driving an excellent car and someone says to me, you know what, I want a car exactly like yours. So what did you do? What were the modifications you did? And I'll tell this guy, these are the modifications I implemented in the engine, in the car to be super fast. So that person makes an exactly copy of my car, but he will be driving my car and not I, because I'm driving this biological machine. And so he's driving that biological machine, the other car. So she finished her book discussing cloning because that was the discussion of that day. And it's very good to see that Dr. Nobre, she focused her intellectual development as much as she could in understanding and reading different articles published by many different scientists in the world who share the idea that this is nothing but a machine. Many individuals who contributed and are still contributing to bring that discussion in order for medicine to change, not only see the individual from its physical perspective, but holistic. We are made of many different parts. And if we truly want health, we need to analyze and treat all different parts of who we are. But again, as a true spiritist, Dr. Nobre, she finishes with her moral arguments in each of this chapter. And basically, that argument is we should do our best to be a better version of ourselves by having less selfishness, arrogance, jealousy, greed, all these powerful emotions that causes our spiritual delay, our spiritual progress delay. And she tells us that the best course of action is to follow Christ's suggestion of helping others, because by helping others, we're helping ourselves. In conclusion, I want to say that it's such a big challenge doing these videos because it's a live video, a live recording, and yet I feel I'm talking just to myself. I'm way more comfortable in talking with a group of individuals that I see in person because I could see people's reaction. I can develop the strategy of how I'm going to bring the next topic. But here I am talking to myself, and that creates a challenge. So I ask you for your forgiveness if I have made this a little bit complicated, but it's just that it's kind of hard to be talking to yourself for approximately 1 hour. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Júlio. It was brilliant. It was very nice indeed. And the good thing is that, although our audience here is not that large, but that will stay, and people who are really interested in the topic and so on, they'll be able to watch it. We have Anadine. She's here. I'm sorry. Thanks for the excellent explanation. I always follow Dr. Marlene speech in person by us in Brazil. So yeah, it's good to see, the way you brought, the information, you digested it and presented it. It was very nice. And I know what you mean, because it's very important for someone who is presenting, especially a very complex topic, to look at the eye of those in the audience, to scan them all the time to see what their reaction is. And that helps us actually sometimes to go deeper into a subject or try to explain it in a slightly different way. But, this is a different environment. But the good thing is that it will stay for those who want to watch it in the future. And that was very good, very clarifying, when you talked about the perispirit and the way Dr. Marlene Nobre, she, did her lecture on the subject, which is a very complex one. But coming from someone with a medical background is always very, very good. So we have no words but to thank you for your time, the time spent preparing it. It was very
Mir, if you allow me, a funny
yes, please.
story. I was recently in El Salvador, and then we're discussing the topic of mediumship. And one of the things for those who don't learn and they don't study, they think that any symptom, it's mediumship. A spirit is influencing them. And the rule of law in the spiritist literature, you always seek a physical cause first, then a spiritual one. And then I went on to say, some people they feel dizzy and they think they're being manipulated by a spirit. And I told them there are many physical ailments that can cause, dizziness, including diabetes. And then I kept going on explaining what diabetes is and the process of diabetes and insulin and osteosclerosis. And then at the end of the lecture, I come to find out there were 6 endocrinologists in that audience. So then I felt really stupid because here I was trying to break down what diabetes is, for these individuals who are expert on the topic. So I told them, my apologies. I have no idea who you guys are, because that's the challenge of speaking to a spiritist audience that you have no clue who people are. You have no idea how you're going to address it. But we try to always do our best, which is, it doesn't matter how much intellectual knowledge you give. This should be useful. We want to give a tool in which I can apply on the following day. And the tool is, I should lessen my emotions. They are negative, the imperfections that cause my pain, and I should enhance the qualities by doing good to others. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, indeed. And we see that, these moral rules that we should follow, they have a purpose. There is an explanation why, they are so important. We also have here from Toronto, Canada. Hello. From Suzanne Wenzing. And also our dear friend Elsa is here with us. Thank you so much, Júlio and Munir. So it was very, very nice indeed. We are going to make some announcements now. So next month, that will be on the 3rd of April, first Sunday of April, 7 p.m. in UK time, GMT. We will have our dear friend Sylvia Gibbons. She'll be talking about the gift of mediumnimity. Another, book by Dr. Nobre, and Sylvia is going to talk to us about this book. So don't miss it. We also want to invite you to our Mediums book study. It is an online study every Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Here you have the QR codes if you want to join us, and also the ID and passcode for the Zoom meeting. It's open to everyone. You can join. It'll be a pleasure to have you there with us, participating in this online study. We also have a study of the book Genesis. That is every Wednesday, 12 noon UK time. Again, you have here the ID and the passcode for the Zoom platform. Just join us. It'll be a pleasure to see you there with us. And the Spiritist Society of London also holds a online study every Tuesday, 7 p.m. London time. And it's about the book Heaven and Hell, and followed by the study of the Gospel according to Spiritism. And both of them books by Allan Kardec. And we want to thank Kardec Radio for helping us and for embracing these projects, and also providing all the help that we need, including the platform for us to bring to you these talks. So that was what we had for today. So Júlio, thank you so much on behalf of the organizers here. I want to thank you. It's been a great pleasure, and I'm sure people will be delighted with your presentation. And, if you want to say a few final words, please do so.
Thank you, Munir, for your kind words. I know they are truly born out of your kindness, because I'm very critical of myself, and believe me, I'm not pleased when I have to talk by myself for 50 minutes. I stumble upon many concepts, but the goal is, my friends, to always be a better version of ourselves. That is our mission. Every activity we're engaged in, we should think. We're already in the month of March, Munir. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And what happened to 2025? We're already writing 2026, and it's the month of March. And I truly feel that we're going to have the same sensation when this reincarnation is over. Just like that old man who's 103 told me, I never thought it was going to go by so fast. So if life goes by so fast, let's do our best to take advantage of the opportunities given by Christ for us to be a better version of ourselves. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And let's not leave for tomorrow what we can do today. See, let's take advantage of. Before we go, we just want to thank again from São Paulo, Brazil. Thanks from Ana. We also have here with us, let me see here, lost myself. Here. Our dear friend Eric, he is here with us. Greetings from me in Firth too. Thank you so much, Eric. He's he's with us studying in our online studies. Dear friend from Germany, and also Elsa. See you all soon again. Yes, thank you so much, Elsa. So, and Suzanne, okay, Suzanne, you got a little too late, but you can always, get back to the start of the talk. And it's a pleasure to have you here with us. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you, Júlio, and see you all in a month's time. So from now, bye-bye.